Chip, a very good evening to you. Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. I'm starting to get a bit worried about Grant Shapps. Everywhere he goes, there seems to be some kind of problem befalling him. You know, he went over to Florida to watch the firing of the missile out of the submarine, and it was a dud. And he's now gone over to Poland. He's been telling the world that Vladimir Putin's busy saber rattling. So Vladimir Putin played a little trick on him by the looks of it.
Well, and that also shows you one thing, Mike, because one of the 4+1 capabilities that we're missing, certainly in the army, is electronic warfare, along with air defense, fires, that's both artillery and rocket systems, drones and counter drones. And also that electronic warfare thing puts you in one of the 5 domains of war that we talk about. We don't just talk about land, sea and air now. We also talk about cyber and space. And the key thing is we're short on all of those. So if you want to have more capability and more mass in the areas that you've got problems in, you certainly need more money in the defense budget. I think the important thing this week really is not that sort of announcement. It's really that there was a 0.2% increase in GDP. Growing the economy gives you more money to put in defense as a percentage. That's the key important thing. But in terms of some of your other stories in the last 10 or 15 minutes, one of the things that we absolutely miss at the moment is we don't have ballistic missile defense for critical national infrastructure. I know you talked about the national air traffic system. Yes. So it's a choice there between protecting the carriers or protecting the capitals. There are no surface-to-air missile sites in the UK mainland. The only way you can do that is with the Type 45, 5 Daring-class destroyers. There were supposed to be 12 of those purchased. It then went down to 8. It plateaued at 6. So that's where you need more capability and mass to protect those sorts of things.
Right. I mean, a couple of years ago, I was talking to colleagues of yours, experts in defence, who were saying things like there wouldn't necessarily be any more need for kind of ground warfare, if you like, and old-fashioned warfare, and that the future was all about cyber, and that was where the government was saying they were going to start investing their money. But from what you're saying, they've allowed the kind of the boots-on-the-ground style warfare equipment to run down, and they haven't really done much about replacing it in the cyber area either.
Well, I think that's true, particularly in the land force, really across NATO. So if you look, for example, at the UK at the moment, we don't have a warfighting division. Won't be there until 2030, given the fact that the 3 main vehicles that are coming online aren't there until 2030. That's Boxer, right, Ajax and Challenger 3. Our very high readiness force at the moment, which is on the NATO exercise, is 7 Light Mechanized Brigade Combat Team. That has 2 vehicles called Jackal and Foxhound. They were actually purchased for Afghanistan as protected patrol vehicles. They are not something that you could fight in a formation against a tank formation coming the other way.
No. And, you know, obviously, since all of those conversations I had, we've now got the war in Ukraine, we've now got the conflict in the Middle East, and it seems as though there are many, many other wars going on around the world, which we would not really be able to enter into in terms of peacekeeping roles or anything else.
Well, I think that's true. I don't think we'll ever be doing sovereign operations again, so we're likely to be part of an alliance. But there are certain things and myths about war that we need to let go for the future. One of them is that wars will be short. We've sort of got seduced by looking at the previous conflicts, for example, in the Middle East. There were sort of 11 days, 18 days, 19 days. The one in Nagorno-Karabakh in 2020 was 44 days, and think that wars will be short. Well, Ukraine and what's going on in the current Gaza-Israeli thing is showing us that wars may not be short. If wars are not going to be short, you need sustainability and availability of equipment, along with a mass behind that, so that if you get things which are hit and taken out, you've got something in depth. And we certainly don't seem to have that at the moment in the way that the Russians are showing in Ukraine.
No, quite. Interesting story from Denmark today, Chip. They're going to start conscripting women for military service. Any particular reason for that? Is it as a result of the sort of NATO activities, as a result of what Sweden's done?
I don't think particularly. I don't really know the composition organisationally of the Danish and whether they've restricted the roles of women before. It would make sense to use women in any force if it's 50% of your population.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean they all have to be on the front line or whatever. They can go where they want if they meet the standard that you want to do. Denmark is a really interesting country at the moment, a great supporter of Ukraine. So, for example, it is giving all its artillery systems and all its ammunition to Ukraine. So it will need to recapitalize its entire artillery inventory for the future. So it is, it's one of those key contributors to keeping Ukraine on the road to future success.
Yeah, absolutely right. And just to go back to Grant Shapps finally, before we finish up, what the Russians did, seemingly, was to jam the radar, which made it impossible for them to use radar to judge where they were. I mean, does that mean that the Russians might have other capabilities? For example, could they suck all the information out of the plane itself and see what the plane had been doing and see what, instructions had been put into the computers on it?
Yeah, all that sort of stuff is possible. Cyber intrusion is one of the things that you're always wary about, and we kind of saw that really with the leaks in Germany in the last few weeks, where they managed to exfiltrate data, and data is the big prize. You can find a lot out from data, and securing the data is really what you need to do for the future. There's a lot of systems in the UK, particularly around the NHS, legacy systems which aren't secure. That is a critical vulnerability in terms of critical national infrastructure in the future, which countries, not only Russia but China, would seek to exploit in any war.
Yeah, and it does show as well, doesn't it, that Putin can still just mess around with us when and if he chooses to.
It does, but yeah, I think in context, I would say that GCHQ in particular and the American equivalent are cyber superpowers who, in extremis, could degrade and destroy Russian systems. So if you were going to have an equivalency and you don't really want to get into a cyber war, I think we would probably come out better than the Russians.
Yes, I think that's probably right, because we're always told that a lot of their equipment is a little bit sort of back to the Stone Age time. But Chip, thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Major General Chip Chapman there, former head of counter-terrorism, of course. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for your time.